Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Commander Clash podcast, where we talk all things Commander. And this week, we are talking about cards you should play together. You know, if you're playing one of these, you should probably play the other ones, or maybe this is a set of cards that you include in a lot of decks. Common packages you might see are like Urza Saga packages, our Bounce Land package, stuff like that. So we're gonna go over some of our favorite packages, or maybe packages you don't know about. Join with me is Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive. How are you doing, Seth?
I'm doing super good. I have some packages that I play a lot, so I'm excited for this topic.
Krim, the Asian Avenger. Do you have a Wrath of God package? I see your shirt.
Surprisingly, no. But you know what? Call me FedEx or USPS because I'm bringing a bunch of packages anyways. So I'm excited.
Wait, FedEx or UPS? That means our packages are delivered like 3 doors down and declared lost. And we get it.
But I brought it, right? The point is that I brought it.
Oh, this is a total aside. Did you see there is this package of someone ordered a serialized card and it was like bent in half. And it looks like, someone, it got stuck in the the mail sorting thing. You're like, oh, who would send like hundreds of dollars of cards in a top loader? But it turns out it was shipped in a box, and the box was literally like chopped in half. And you're like, wow, that is gnarly.
Oh my god.
Anyway, I don't know where we're going with that, but
That could happen, in shipment, I guess.
Packages.
Well, I hope if you order the packages I'm going to be presenting that they don't come chopped in half. I hope they come well intact from our sponsor,
All
Cargin
right.
Cost.
well intact packages. That's what we're going for today.
Yeah.
But before we do that, today's show is brought to you by Ultimate Guard, premium protection for your trading cards. If you shipped your cards in a boulder, it probably would arrive intact. Just throwing it out there. But all the accessories you see on this channel, deck box, playmat, sleeves, are brought to you by Ultimate Guard. Check them out at ultimateguard.com. And also Card Conduit, the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. You can skip all the typing, time, and work associated with buy listing. Their curated service lets you send in as many cards as you want with buy list value of $1 or more, and you pay just a 5% service fee. You use their sorted service where you listen sort your cards and pay only 2%. You get a detailed report and fast payment once your order is processed. Get 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/mtggoldfish. So thank you to our sponsors, and it's time for the Ultimate Guard comment of the week. Last week, I was not there, but you guys talked about weird old cards. And Phil was on that episode. Top comment, Mensch777. Love me some Phil. Filling in. Philling.
Very good.
I'm
Very-
gonna let
I
you know
feel
that
like-
Phil very appreciates that wordplay. He is a
Oh.
big
Never heard it.
proponent of it.
I've
we have,
never
we
heard
have heard
it.
this joke
Always
many
new
times.
every time.
It never gets old.
It gets funnier. It gets funnier every time. Yeah, it's one of those jokes.
All right.
Blast.
Let's move on to card packages. I'll kick things off. And this is my favorite package. This is a package I don't think most people know about, and I didn't know about until I became a red main this season. Fun fact, red is my favorite color to play. I think it's the 3rd strongest color. Ooh, there's so many hot takes being
Ooh.
dropped here.
Wow.
So one of the reasons is red has a hard time ramping, and I have figured out the way to ramp in red without mana rocks, right? I don't believe in mana rocks. Of course, if you play mana rocks, then this is not an issue for you, right? But I want to make sure I don't lose half my mana sources when not an F board wipe, but any board wipe goes off, right? So I want to make sure that we have hardy land ramp, okay? And here is the red land ramp package, and I put this in 3rd place, okay? Number 1 is green. Number 2 is white. Number 3 is red. So I am very, very, very confident in my red ramp game, and I'm very happy to play red now. And it all starts with a sister to my favorite card, Dowsing Device. Did you know there's another dowsing card and it's broken? So Dowsing Device is a 2-mana artifact. When it enters or another artifact enters, up to 1 target creature gets +1/+0 and haste until end of turn. Whatever. Who cares what that is, right? Then transform Dowsing Device if you control 4 or more artifacts. And the trick is it flips into a land that taps for red. right? So it ramps, right? Provided it doesn't die before it does that. And then it has an ability, which again, who the heck cares? But 3 mana tap until end of turn, target creature gains haste and gets +X+0, where X is the number of artifacts you control. So this is like suspicious rampant growth with suspend 2, right?
Mhm.
You can actually think of this like Search for Tomorrow, actually. So Search for Tomorrow is like rampant growth, but it's like 1 mana, suspend 2, I think. But you need to play other artifacts, okay? Don't worry. The second key to this is Brass's Tunnel Grinder. We've seen this time and time again on Clash, right? It's actually very good. 3 mana when it enters, discard any number of cards, then draw that many +1. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended, put a board counter on it. And if there are 3 or more board counters, remove them, transform it. It transforms into a land, right? That land adds a red, and then it has an ability of when you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by Tecluton, that's the name of the card, discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. Irrelevant. I don't even care about that, even though that's the reason why most people play this land. It's 3 mana that eventually flips into a land. Now, all of these need like descending and artifact synergies, right? The other parts of this, Surveyor Scope, we talked about this before, you need to play this. Thematic Compass, 2 mana artifact, you pay 3 tap, you search for a basic. When you have 7 or more lands, it transforms. So it's a ramp spell when you get to 7, okay? But it helps you get lands, so it's also very scuffed card drawing while you're at it. And then Treasure Map, 2 mana artifact, pay 1 tap, scry 1, put a landmark counter on it. And then if there are 3 or more landmark counters, remove them, transform, create 3 treasures, and it becomes a land that taps for colorless, and then you can sack treasures to draw. So the trick is you play, these are all artifacts, by the way, which turns on Dowsing Device, right? In addition to your Dowsing Dagger, your Burnished Heart, your Canoptic Wraiths, right? Your Solemns. Like, notice they're all artifacts. So Dowsing Device is like not dead, right? Like it actually flips. This is good. And then we have the Solemn Friends, right? So we know about Solemn, 4 mana, ramp a land, right? That's colorless. We know Scampering Surveyor, 4 mana, ramp a cave. You guys have seen me use this, and I think this is actually the best ramp spell in red. Oger Axonal, Deepest Might. So that's the 4 mana 4/4. Trample. If a red source would deal non-combat damage less than Oger's power, you deal Oger's power instead. But when it dies, it transforms into a land. This is like critical, right? This prevents you from dying. If there's a wrath, it's great. You just ramped. It's reverse Solemn. And I've tried this so many times, and it always works. The only problem is it might be too good. It's bad in that if it's like turn 8, you play this, people might just murder you because that ability is very scary, right? Like that's normally a combo piece ability, but on turn 4, no one can kill you through the Oger anyway, right? So on curve, it's not a problem, right? But late game, you need to make sure that you don't suddenly look like you're about to combo off, even though you're just literally playing it for ramp. And then, Seth, I know you appreciate this one. There and back again. 5 mana.
Yes.
Up to 1 target creature can't block as long as you control it. The ring tempts you. I don't know what that even does. Step 2, search your library for a mountain, put it on the battlefield and shuffle. That's ramp. Step 3, create Smog. I've never even made Smog in my life, but 6/6 red dragon with haste. And then when it dies, create 14 treasure tokens.
That's like Mega Ramp.
Okay. So Richard,
Tomer, I know you're groaning.
I'm a big red believer. Red is one of my favorite colors. I'm Izzet Mage for life, so red and blue, baby, for life. And I have two mono red paper decks in my collection. And I agree with some of these takes, like Dowsing. You had me on Dowsing Device. I run that in like all my red decks because it's basically a rampant growth. But then we're getting to there and back again.
I'll cut you off right there. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No. 5 mana waits 2 turns to get your mountain. This is where you lost me, Richard. Some of these are good. I would.
It's 5 mana. Create a It's a 6/6 red dragon. Okay, it's not like you're paying 5 mana for a single mountain, right? The rings tempts you, which I don't know what that really does. Let's say that's worth 0.1 of a card. Right, and then you get a mountain that's worth it, and then you get a 6/6 dragon beater, which if it dies, you get 14 treasures. that's a mana geyser
A lot
for
of
free,
treasure.
right? You know, like that's
The
that's
game
not
is
a nothing.
over by the time you're getting this dragon. Is the problem? Like your ramp is so slow. These are so slow. It's like turn 5, I play this, and then I'm hoping like by turn 6 or so or 7,
No one's
the
gonna
ramp
kill
will
you,
start to.
right? If you go Oger into there and back again, who's killing you, right? Like it's solid, man. Like I feel red is so OP. How many red games am I sitting there where I have the most lands or most mana, right? We're not. So the second package is gonna be the mana geyser package, but if you ignore that, right? Like the dowsing device. One thing I didn't mention was Mirren Safe House. It goes with this as well. So that's the 3 mana artifact. It has activated abilities of all lands and all graveyards. So you need to fill your deck with 5 fetches, right? And then you use the fetch, and then Mirren Safe House is 3 mana ramp, right? Because it becomes a fetch land. It's also a shady mana rock in the meantime, but I would just immediately sack it for a mountain so that you don't risk, Oppo Agent and all that nonsense. But this is I'm telling you guys,
So-
you need to believe, because I was skeptical at first, but none of this ever backfires. It like just works. Like dowsing device looks so conditional, but like this package alone has like 10 artifacts, let alone whatever you're actually playing in your deck. Right?
That
So
device is not situational. It's
Yeah,
very
right?
you
Like,
have
that's
me on this
rapid growth.
one.
that's
But like,
Well, I mean,
Closure
it's
and
there
the
and
there
back
again.
Yeah.
The Mirror
Oh, the-
Safe House. No,
the-
thank you.
the funny-
You're in safe house. You
have
can play 3
Explorer
mana,
Scope over
rapid
here.
growth.
That's the meme. Come on, Explorer Scope is over there. Come on.
I mean, the funny thing is, I like there and back again. I'm on board with that one. I do wonder about like, it's just different than when I think of ramp. Because when I think of ramp, I think of like the fill starts, right? Like I'm trying to do this really like explosive thing, turn 2, turn 3, get up to a ton of mana. That's what I kind of think of. And then when I see like Thematic Compass or even Treasure Map, like those are good cards that I like playing, but it's hard for my brain to wrap around them being ramp in the traditional sense, just because Thematic Compass is like, you need 7 lands on the battlefield. Treasure Map, really powerful like card selection advantage engine, but even that, you got to play it. You need 2-3 turns of like tapping it. Like, is it fast enough, Richard? That's my
We
question.
can't all
Like,
be green,
is
Seth.
it too?
We
Can't all
Is
be
it
green.
too?
Okay. How
Like,
many
how does it
games
play
do you
in
know end on
practice?
turn 5? This is like all our games
Not many.
go to turn 7, 8, 9, 10. Maybe the game is effectively over on game 7 and it ends on turn 8 or 9 or something, but they all go that. No matter how many times Phil sits at the table and Simic turbo ramps all his crap out, right? Like the game goes on, you are a step behind them, but you know how you get like 5 steps behind them? Playing 4 mana rocks, right? To like be
That's
on
true.
pace, and then the first time the board is dealt with, you are actually like in the Stone Ages and out of the game, right? So yes, you
Yeah.
are behind green, but red has other advantages we'll talk about later, which will slingshot you ahead of green. But being 1 step behind first place is not that bad, right? Like it's better than being 3 steps behind first place, which is like black, blue, right? So,
Black is
so
Way better.
try it. It works. It works. And then we didn't even talk about all of the creature-based ramp, right? So Explorer Scope, Sticky Fingers, Sword of the Animus, Forge of Frontier, Hearth and Home. Those are all artifacts, by the way, which help with your dowsing device. But if you
So
actually have
built
creatures you can use-
around
Mhm.
dowsing device. This whole like
No, I'm saying you
everything
don't
you-
need to build around dowsing device. It just works because it looks like it's
Okay.
conditional, but in reality, it's not conditional, right? Like that is the revelation. And then you randomly might actually make use of its abilities. I think I actually won with a dowsing device activation, playing some random deck that was not really meant to be an artifact deck. Right? Because you just have random artifacts sitting around. Just like in white, you have random creatures sitting around. But I want you to take away. So if you can yell about everything, but Oger and Dowsing Device and Brass's Tunnel Grinder,
Those-
which everyone kind of knows, those are the two secret sauces to red that the other colors do not have access to. Right? So those are the 2 secret sauces. And Oger is like the true, like so good that I might actually call it. So apparently Oger is just a title. It's
Dowsing
O'Hare.
Device,
It's accidental.
Tunnel Grinder, Dowsing Device. Those I definitely agree. I think Tunnel Grinder is a little bit not as good as I would hope to be. because I run it a lot. But
Gotta
like
play all
it
Fetch
dies.
Lands, Fable,
No,
Passage,
it still
Static
takes 3
Vista.
turns. It takes 3 turns to flip, and people are always overestimating it, so it always gets blown up. So I think that's a problem. Like it's just I agree with like half of these, and then the other half I'm just like it's way too slow, man. Like I don't want to be ramping on turn 7. I want to be ramping turns like 1 to 3 to 4 maybe, and then I want to be like drawing cards and getting ahead. I don't want to be. So I take half of these, and then also all of these cards. The best way to ramp in mono red, honestly, is you build an artifact deck. So you build like Feldon or something, and then all these cards, these artifacts, they have more synergies, and then you can pop off. But like,
Then you're an
So-
artifact deck.
yeah, then you're an artifact deck.
I mean,
And,
I'll
like,
play
yeah,
for
that's
basically
that's
artifact
that's the
decks.
real truth. That's the real truth.
I mean, sure. I just don't. I don't. You could probably argue for a lot of these things, but There and Back Again is the only one that I'm just like a little scratching my head on. Like,
So
It's not
good.
bad. I mean, you can cut it. I
Smug.
mean, it is slow, but it's something. But
Smug. It's 14
trust
treasures.
me, trust me. White, like, to me, like this season has been the aha moment where we had this like maybe 8 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, where like White is trash. What is Cartographer's Hawk? You know, what is Secret Rendezvous? Like, how do you even play White? Like, once you see this package, suddenly this color becomes very playable and very good, right? So I encourage you, if you think red is trash, to try this. If you think red is great, then you don't need this. You already know what you're doing, right? But if you think red is trash, like try this, and we're gonna leave black mages crying because black is the one I just cannot understand. But
No.
this,
Oh, you just
this
get
ramp
coffers
is
and you're
good.
good. Oh, I'm gonna
This is
try.
good, this is
I'm
good,
gonna
this is good,
I'm
this is
gonna
good, this is
try
good.
like I'm gonna try like
Like-
half of them and we'll see. I don't. I actually O'Hare Axelon's the one I'm most, or Axonil's the ones I'm most skeptical of, just because I remember the first time you dropped that in a Commander Clash, and I kind of freaked out. Like it's a card that just in my mind, I
you
think if
insta-block
someone
with
plays
this and let it die.
something very bad is about to happen. So like immediately that's where my brain goes. So I wonder, like now I'm not as scared of it because I know you're playing it as a Solemn for some reason, which I've never even heard of before today. But so I'm not scared of it now, but I wonder in a random pod if it would be very scary to people. Like, are you going to convince people at a Magic Con, oh, I'm just playing this, it's a ramp spell. It's flipping into the land. Like, I don't know if you're going to be
Here's
able
the
to
thing,
sell
right?
a random pod on that.
Either they attack you. Hopefully, it's not all flyers. If it's literally anything like that, you just block and it dies.
Yeah.
Or they're like, it's so scary. Let me Doomblade it. I'm like, thank God.
And you're like,
right?
cool.
Like, yes, you've accelerated
Yeah.
me, right? So, and then if you're playing like Rakdos, you can Phyrexian Tower it or something, right? But
Yeah.
your job, like this is like, think about this, Seth. It's propaganda press Solemn. You know how like Solemn is this immovable wall. It's still only a 2/2 though, right? If people want, they can hit you. Now you got a 4/4 trample. And then here's the kicker, right? If someone else is a threat and no one's doing anything about it, you just turn Axonil sideways and start killing them, right? Like it's so
Alright,
good.
alright.
It's power craft Solemn. like if you like Solemn, you need to try O'Hare Axonil. You need to try it. It's so good.
I do like that most of these do not require me putting basics in my deck, so that's a win.
We don't
That's
believe in
a-
basics here. I mean, Surveyor Scope, but that's the exception. All right.
Why
so,
don't you add
speaking-
Diamond Pickaxe
So
to this?
So there are a bunch of artifacts. So Diamond Pickaxe. There's another one that also makes treasures where it's like 1 mana, 2 mana to equip to a creature, and then when you attack, or is it attack or hit? When you attack, you
It's
make
attack.
a treasure token.
Yeah, yeah.
The other one, I
So
think,
if
is
you
even
are
better. It has
creature heavy,
menace.
if you're playing Rogak or something, this could be an option. But they're treasures, so treasures are not as good as actual ramp, but they are options, right?
But you
So-
get it faster, right? Between this and you also have the Capenna equipment that'll allow it, so it's like a beat stick or something like that. That's the one where it's like low investment and low equip costs, and you get the mana much earlier.
You need creatures, right? So when you have creatures, yes, right? But do you want a burst of mana or do you want mana forever, right? Because you could always just play Seething Song and get more mana faster. But so treasures are one-time use. If you have treasure synergies or something, then it starts making a lot more sense, right? But for general purpose, I like getting lands, and I would get a sort of the Animist or what's the other one? The Nissa's Animus. Bitterthorn Nissa's Animus before I start going to pickaxes, unless there's like very I'm playing a one-drop commander, right? Or, I have treasure synergies or something like that, right? But yes, those are all options. All right, Seth.
I have the only package that really matters, the most important package, I would say, which is I don't really like basic lands. We've talked about this many times before. So if you want to play Commander and do a lot of ramping and play 0 basics, there's a really powerful and relatively cheap green ramp package that shows up in all of my decks from pretty much mono green up to 5 color if I'm playing green. So these are cards that are going to ramp a land into play very consistently, but do not require you to play any basics in your deck. So the list here, you start off with, I think the biggest ones are things that tutor up forests in specific. So you have like 3 visits, you have Nature's Lore in the 2 mana slot. Farseek can't play in a mono green because it doesn't get a forest, but as long as you're 2 color plus, it's essentially another one of those, just getting a island, plains, mountain, or swamp. And then once you move up the curve, you get stuff like Splunking and Explorer, cards I really like. They're not quite as consistent because you don't necessarily get a land. Instead, you get to put an extra land into play from your hand, but assuming you're playing enough lands, you should ramp and they have the upside of drawing you cards. And then once you get to the top end of the ramp curve, you're going to need some really, really strong stuff, like Open the Way, maybe the best card that we've seen in Commander Clash over the last couple of seasons. The Ringo South, a little bit specific. It ramps equal to the number of legends you control. You reveal cards equal to the number of legends you control. Put a land in for each of them. So if you're a legend-heavy deck, really good. Hour of Promise just snags any 2 lands for 5 mana. Titania's Command's one that I've really come around to. It's 6 mana, so a little expensive, but it's just like Hour of Promise, gets any 2 lands. But you also get another choice of exiling someone's graveyard and gaining a life for each card that was exiled, making a couple bears, putting some counters on your teams. And then new additions, Omen Pass Journey came out this year. A little bit risky since it's an enchantment, but you search up for 5 lands, and on your end step, you get one of those at random for 4 mana. So if it sticks around, it could potentially ramp you 5 times for 4 mana. And then Sowing Microspawn. Speaking of new Solemns, like this is, I think, the best new Solemn. It's just a 4-drop that you cast it, and you get to put any land into play untapped. And then if you kick it for 2 more mana, you even get to exile one of your opponent's lands. So these are, I think, just the best ramp cards in Commander, and I play them in pretty much every single deck that I can, because it lets me play like 3 basic lands, overload on all those sweet value utility lands, and still ramp really consistently.
Okay, I'm glad you're on the tech of Sowing Microspawn, because I think
so
that
good.
card is like so sick.
It's so good.
That is one of the definitely the better cards. And then on top of that, I can safely say, believe it or not, I'm gonna drop some knowledge. I've been quietly and very secretly playing some green off screen. And Omen Path Journey is the truth. That card is no longer hidden tech, I think. People like it, but the best part is actually no, it's still pretty off the radar, but like I love this card. As long as you're smart about what you tutor, you're not showing like, oh, I'm gonna get Glacial Chasm. I'm gonna get like all these busted lands. I will just straight up get like 4 basics or whatever, right? Doesn't matter. The least threatening lands, and it will just accrue you so much value at the end of every turn. You'll get so much mana over time that like people won't even think twice about it, because it's not offensive enough unless you give them a reason for it to be offensive. And that's where like you just got to make sure you get some basic looking lands. And that's all it is there for. And on top of that, I'm going to say it, Seth. I'm going to say it, okay? It's your favorite. What happens when you crack a fetch land? You're deck thinning. Oh, that's right. Boom, baby. We're back on it. And you've just deck thinned like...
Want to deck...
You're deck thinning. You now have a higher chance of hitting action. God. That card is the truth. I think that card is the truth.
I mean, with Omen Pass Journey, if you think about it, it's only 4 mana, right? So as long as you're not exiling, I don't know, if you're a Maze's End deck and you exile your Maze's End, that's going to be super risky. Or like you said, Glacial Chasm, like you probably don't want to do that. But as long as you pick your lands wisely, what do you need? 2 lands, and it's a good investment. And if you get 3 or 4 or 5 lands, it's like one of the most absurd ramp spells in the format. So it works out way more than you think. People are kind of scared of it, but in practice, like Grim said, it doesn't get blown up that often, and you usually get a decent amount of lands out of it.
The first trigger is end step, so you're almost guaranteed 1 land, unless someone instant speed removes this, right? And then you need to make 1 turn cycle, and it's like already one of the best cards in the game, right? 4 mana, get 2 non-basics, even if they're random, is like insane. And then every turn afterwards, like you're pulling further and further ahead. But between Open the Way and Open Math Journey, like that's kind of all the top end
So-
ramp you need, right? Like you just go
Yeah.
Farseek into Open Path Journey into Open the Way, you won. Farseek into
Yeah, the
Open
game's
the Way,
over,
you
yeah.
probably won, right? So
I think my
Disgusting.
only
I don't know what Tateda's command is doing here, but yeah, like you've already won after your Open Path Journey.
I like Titania's command. You play Hour of Promise, don't you, Richard? Put
Yes.
1 mana tax, but you get to make bears out of it, or you have Graveyard Hate, or gain a bunch of, you like incidental life gain. A lot of times in late game, this is gaining like 10 or 15 life, plus being an Hour of Promise for 1 more mana. Like,
Oh, wait a minute.
I-
Exile
Mm.
target player's
Overlook-
graveyard. Gain 1 life. Actually, Seth might have sold.
Yeah,
me
the
on
card
you
is the
actually get a lot
truth.
of, it actually is pretty good. Like, or
I
you get a
played
couple
in
trump
my,
blockers if someone's Voltroning with the bears. Like,
Yep.
so it actually ends up gaining you a big amount of life along with getting the 2 lands. It's a little slow as 6 mana, but the upside is there, I think.
Yeah, I
Six
hope
ma-
they step
okay,
on
I'll be
this.
very real with you. It's really a 4 mana card, right? It's a 4 or 5 mana card when you're in green. So
That is also true.
this card has been phenomenal because I think we just glossed right over the part where you get to put 2 1/1 counters on each creature you control. This is very good. This has been a game ender spell. On top of that, if they
that
had
assumes Seth would ever attack, so that's
Oh, yeah, that's
why
fair.
it's basically blank text over there. right?
wow, there's only
Yeah, I never
2
picked that mode.
modes. Believe
This
it or
is the
not, that mode
same-
is very
So this
relevant.
is the same argument that Tomer, I think, was hinting at with what is it? There and Back Again, right? So like if you make it to late game, by late game I mean 6 mana, this is great, right? The problem is if your hand is like land, Titania's command, your other like Crater Hoof or something, and then you
Yeah.
might never make it here. Right? With Open the Way, you can be like, well, X equals 1, I guess, right? Here we go. Right? So that is the problem. It's almost like closer to a win con because it costs so much
Yeah.
mana. Right? So if you get there in good shape, then this is great value. But with your scuffed hands, it's like super duper dead, which is why Open Path Journey, Open the Way are so strong. Because they
So-
scale early game and late game. Right?
How I
So-
clarify that is I think this card is still good and worth running, but I wouldn't add it as a ramp slot. Like if I'm trying to have I need to have a critical mass of ramp to play in the early game, I wouldn't count this as a ramp spot because it does take a while to be able to cast, and it's not something that you want to see in your opening hand unless you already have other ramp cards to get you to it. But because it's so flexible, like the other modes are actually all just very good. That I would count it as not a ramp slot, but just like something that can help close out the game, as Richard said. So I think it's still good. It's just not, I wouldn't count it as like the ramp quota for my deck, you know?
That's fair. Also, just super quick, sneakily on this list, Splunking's probably the most busted card. I
Oh,
feel like that's a
Splunking's
card
so
that you
good.
should just run in like
All of our
every
lands ETB
single
tapped.
deck.
I was going to
Because-
mention that.
It's so insane. Like when it works with all these other ramp spells too, right? Because a lot of these are putting lands into play tapped, and then they're all coming to play untapped, and it leads to these like weird combo turns almost, where like when all your ramp spells put your lands into play untapped, it just gets so crazy. Plus, it draws you a card, and if you got a cave, you gain life. That it's such a ridiculous card.
Remember when like what is it? A while back, I brought up that I think now Amulet of Vigor and Spelunking might just be good enough to play generic.
I'm
And
on board with Splunking because it draws a card. Amulet, I'm still a little bit more iffy on.
I don't know, man.
Very
I'm-
mana efficient.
every
You can-
every year, I'm getting closer
Kill
to just
Saga.
like no, that is the truth. Like I think like already Spelunking. If I play green, I play it right.
Yeah.
But now I'm just like maybe because recently I've been playing with a lot of Black Panther like my Black Panther deck is so good. It's probably been like my favorite deck of the year. But these amulets are just coming up and they're pretty good. Having the redundancy and the ability to draw it and have it is insanely important. I don't know. I've really leaned into maybe now just main decking it. Like, and it's not. I'm gonna sound wild here, but there's a world where it may not just be exclusive to green.
Yeah.
I mean, you can extend this package, right? Because you can Open the Way, hit an Urza Saga. The saga gets Amulet of Vigor, right? And
Yeah.
like Seth didn't include all the lands here, right? So these 4 mana spells that get 1 land, so they're actually very strong when you include Ancient Tomb and Temple of the False Gods, right? Because you grab those, that's the same as grabbing 2 lands. You're literally on par with explosive vegetation at this point, but you can like do whatever, like you have the flexibility of doing whatever you want, right? You can get the glacial chasm, you can get,
Yep.
shifting woodland, whatever, right? Like you take the whole utility land package, which there's, according to Seth, like 35 of, including 3 basics, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
like I used to play Pier's Whim is not here, right? But Pier's Whim is another 4 mana spell that just grabs any land, and you just grab Temple of the False God, right? And
Yeah.
there you go, right? You 4 mana 2 ramped, and then you have the flexibility to do whatever you want, right? So yeah, this is very, very strong, and I don't know how with a straight face you can play like 24s or something in green, right? Like for
Yeah,
budget
very
reasons
easily.
and budget reasons only, would you ever do that,
No.
right?
I'm sorry, but like I'm out here chilling with my like Traverse Outlands and my Galta deck or whatever, or any Gotal deck.
Yeah.
Just be
Okay.
like, I
Traverse
pay 5
Outlands
mana.
is one of the few reasons
Yeah.
to do it, right?
But like also if I'm in an Elf Ball deck or anything and I have like a bunch of dudes that are tapped down, then I cast Harvest Season and I do the same thing. Or like I'm in a modified deck and I have Kodama of I think it's West Tree or something. It's like whenever a modified creature deals combat damage, you ramp out a basic. It's like those things are so cost efficient that you could just like drop that down and then ramp out like 10 lands.
I agree.
So,
So
like-
when you have a specific
Tomer.
reason, you play
Yes.
forests. If you don't have a
Yes.
specific reason, your deck should be 35 non-basics, right?
Yeah.
like, there's-
I
specific
still
reasons.
I don't believe that. Even if I have good lands, I'm no less than 6 basics. I think
Okay,
6.
I mean,
I've
6
doubled
okay,
that
that's
number.
mono green,
fine,
fine.
sure.
That's
Well, no.
Mono green.
Mono green, that's a different story, right? Okay, Tomer, are you a believer in Jaheira's Respite?
Oh, I want to believe. It's so much mana though.
Tomer, you can't say that about Ink Shield and not
Yo,
believe.
I put it in my Calamax deck.
What
because I
is
can
Jaheira's
double it.
Respite? What is Jaheira's
Okay,
Respite?
it's 4 and a green. It's an instant. Search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of attacking creatures attacking you. Put those cards on the battlefield. Tap and
Attack
shuffle.
you,
Fog.
man.
Uh,
If it was attack anyone, then
Then you could do it with your own creature.
want to-
or someone attack someone else and you do it, right? Like that's the problem with Ink Shield, right? It has to come straight at you.
No,
so people can play
Ink Shield,
around it.
though. No,
Right.
no, no,
Ink-
no.
Obviously, Ink Shield can end the game, right?
Ink
but
Shield
this
is the
one,
finisher.
if
yeah.
you fog, right? Like, and if let's say I fog and I got 2 lands, that's more than enough, right? I just got a fog and ramped 2. I think the card is good. I believe in
Dude, I
Jaheira's
just play
Respite.
Ojirax. If that was your
Oh.
house,
Oh.
Ojirax will
Yeah.
stop that 2 attack coming in. Give you a 4/4
Well, this is
and
like-
ramp later.
So the problem with Jaheira's Respite, I played it. Is the problem, and is I had the same criticism with the Saga or whatever in Osier. Is like when I want to
O'Hare.
cast a
It's
fog.
O'Hare.
O'Hare.
It's
When I want to
O'Hare.
cast,
I'll say it correctly.
when I'm casting O'Hare or whatever, my same criticism is always the same. When I'm casting a fog, it's usually at the end of the game because I don't want to die, right? And that's the last time that I actually care about still ramping, and that's why I don't like
Whoa,
it. too
not
much.
true. Not true. Because I think you can still do big mana plays. How many times have you been like, I'm 1 or 2 lands short at the end of the game from actually killing everyone, right?
That's every game.
I think that there is no point in the game where you don't want to ramp.
But
And
no one
you're
attacks
also
you. You
deck
just
thinning.
pass the turn with 5 mana up. That's the problem, right?
Well, it's kind of like seeing a turn 1 Sol Ring versus like a turn 10 Sol Ring, right? Like
always
obviously
good.
one's better than the other.
I think
All
turn
right.
10 Soul Ring's still good.
Tomer, hit us.
Okay. I have one for the Commander Clash crew. So for all of you who have been Clash pilled or whatever in your local meta,
Flash build.
and you're firm believers of the fog meta, and you out there in this fog meta, you're just a lowly combat deck, and all you want to do is hit people, but all your opponents, they're dirtle decks that believe in the fog meta, so they're gonna fog you every single time you try to do this. What are your options? Do you have to play combo to metagame the table? The answer is you probably should. But if you just want to keep playing combat, there are ways of still just sticking it to your average fog, even sticking it to a Teferi's Pro. You can still kill people through a Teferi's Pro. And that's with these anti-fog tech cards that are meant for you combat lovers out there. My top two that I put in like almost every red deck these days, Isengard Unleashed and Insult to Injury. Both of these are damage amplifiers. So Isengard Unleashed is 5 mana red sorcery. Damage can't be prevented this turn. If a source you control would deal damage this turn to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, it deals triple that damage instead and has flashback cost of 7 mana. And Insult to Injury, same thing as a sorcery. It's 3 mana. Damage can't be prevented this turn. If a source you control would deal damage this turn, it deals double. So Isengard Unleashed is triple, but it costs more mana, and it has a flashback. And Insult is 3 mana, but it only deals double. So by themselves, they already can act as finishers. You know, like if you have a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, this can suddenly just do lethal. However, if you cast this knowing that, you know, somebody is playing fogs or whatever, and anticipating a fog, it removes the ability for them to actually get the damage prevented, cast their fog, and they'll die that way. Even if they have Teferi's Pro, I've killed people. Even on Commander Clash, I've killed people through a Teferi's Protection, because even though, you know, Teferi's Protection, you can't lose life, your life total can't change or whatever, combat commander damage is still being tracked. Infect damage is still being tracked. So if you swing at somebody and you manage to do a lethal at them with an Insult to Injury or Isengard Unleashed going on, they still die, which is hilarious. But if you can't run these like cool damage prevention cards, there's ways in white to also get around fogs. Grand Abolisher and Kutsil, for example, and Myro, all of them say your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. So as long as they're on the battlefield, your opponents just are not able to fog or Aetherize or do whatever to mess up with your combat. So it just gives you free reign to do it. Also allows you to combo off of free reign too. But if you're trying to focus on combat, those are ways. Green, mono green is very limited. I think it's just like Questing Beast is one way of getting around fogs. And then any color can run an Inquisitor's Flail. Or not, whoa, what was it? What's it called? Oh no, it's the wrong card.
Conquerors.
I was curious what that.
Conquerors. Everybody can run Conqueror's Flail, which as long as it's equipped to a creature, your opponents can't cast spells on your turn. And then the last tech is, this is relevant to my own personal paper group, is I have a person who at my table loves Glacial Chasm and Field of Dead. Those are his two favorite cards in Magic, essentially. So I always play against them. How do you get around Glacial Chasm? Because it's not a fog, right? It just says damage can't be prevented. Outside of like these mono red abilities, how do you get around it? Well, all of my red decks run Sundering Eruption and Demolition Field, which both can blow up a non-basic. And they're just very good cards. Demolition Field is just like a land, untapped, attached or colorless. And then Sundering Eruption is just an MDFC that is an untapped land on the other side. So those are the way. If you want to still focus on combat, I think these are the best ways of just like, you know, getting around the fog meta.
I have a question for you guys about these cards. Do you consider this like a must include in every deck? Like when you think about building a deck and you're like, I need 10 ramp spells, I need this much removal, is like fog prevention? Is that something where every deck you're like, I want one of these, I want 2 of these, I want 10 of these, 0 of these? Like, how do you guys actually implement these into your decks?
Yes.
I mean, Isengard Unleashed and Insult. Yeah.
Especially our metagame, but like 1 mana counter your whole freaking turn. Like I can't afford that, right? The beauty of all these cards that Tom are listed is they're multi-purpose. So Isengard Unleashed, Insult to Injury, even if there is no fog, it doubles your damage. It gets people dead.
Triples,
right? All of the can't cast spells, even if there is no fog, it makes Crim like cry in a corner. There's no counter spell happening on your turn, right? There's no end of turn shenanigans, right? So they're all multi-purpose, and the sweatier you get, or I guess the more fragile you get. So if I'm playing like 6-card combo week, like you better believe I'm putting a Grand Abolisher in there, right? I can't afford like any piece interacted with. The only caveat I would say is Grand Abolisher, Kutsil, and Mural are so good they get you killed. Like if you just slap it down, everyone like freaks out, right? So you cannot just like randomly throw them down, even though you're doing nothing, right? Because as soon as people...
Richard, what are they gonna do to you? And whatever they're gonna do, they're gonna do it
on their turn,
on their turn,
right? Like you're not ready to win, you don't put this down, right? Because everyone will be like, "Oh, I can't interact. Anything could happen on your turn. Kill everything. Like kill the Grand Abolisher, kill Richard, kill whatever, right? Like everyone just freaks out." So the best use actually is you Green Sun Zenith into them, right? So on your like, if you don't have them on your main phase, you like Green Sun. Do you want to respond? and they're holding a removal spell or something, they can't do it. If they counter, they got to counter blind, right? And if they don't interact with the Green Sun Zenith, Grand Abolish. Well, you can't Green Sun Grand Abolish,
And
right?
you
But
can get
Mural,
Gutzel. You can get
No.
Gutzel.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, not Mural. So Cutzel, the Selesnya one, comes in, and they can't interact anymore. Too late, right? Same with Ameria, like the thing that reanimates out of your graveyard. You're like, Ameria trigger, target this. Anyone want to do anything,
Mhm.
right? And then if they don't do it, kind of like the Ether Vial trick we used to do, right? You activate it, respond, no, too late. So yeah, but yeah, don't just play Grand Abolisher in turn 2 and expect to live. Like everyone's gonna murder you immediately, right? So combo turn.
I don't know, man. But maybe because the deck that I'm playing Grand Abolisher in has a board state. I think that because it is, as you had mentioned, fragile, because it is a human deck, right? Like I have a few, like I have that. I have, my cap deck. I just have these decks where I don't want you to interact with me. So
No.
I think Grand Abolisher is just good enough to where you could throw it out there, and I think you'll be fine.
If you're arch enemy already, then it makes no difference. Right?
Yeah,
if you're already
that's
arch
fair.
enemy, then it makes no difference, right? But if you're not arch enemy, like it will make you arch enemy if you put it down, even if you have nothing to back it up.
I genuinely don't know if that's true anymore, because as soon as everyone will be like, "Whoa, Grand Abolisher, what are you doing?" And then it's just like, "Wait, hold on, your opponent literally plays any card made in 2024," and
But
then it'll just
like the natural inclusion is you're gonna combo off on your turn. Who's playing Grand
Yeah,
Abolisher?
I assume-
Anti-fog tech. Right?
I
Normally
assume
it's Grand Abolisher into a combo kill, right? So you
Yeah.
cannot let it live under normal circumstances, right?
Yeah.
I
That
think
is
it
what
depends
it
on your
is.
deck. Like if Crim's revealing some random human commander and his turns are just dropping a bunch of 1 and 2 drop humans, I'm gonna think, oh, he's just like playing humans. Like, what do I care about Grand Abolisher? But if you're not doing that, my first thought would be it's got to be a combo deck, right? Why else would you play Grand Abolisher other than to protect a combo? So I would be afraid, but I think it's a little contextual based on what your commander is and what your deck's doing.
I think it's just good enough because you don't want people to interact with you. And I don't think it's that bad, right? If I just just play this blindly, whatever this, Myrel, all of that, I don't know. I think these are just good cards. And I think that reducing the interaction, everybody wants that. It doesn't tip your hand in what you're doing.
So
Yeah,
I would make one modification though, Tomer. Demolition Field needs to be Strip Mine. Because Demo Field is 3 mana. But the thing with Strip Mine is you can just kill their basics. So you can upkeep, kill their forest, and you'd be like, you have any mana to fog with anymore? Right? If they have double blue up, you kill
Well,
an
then they
island.
obscuring haze you, and then
Yeah, I
you're
mean,
like,
you can't do
oh,
anything
I
about
got
that,
my
right? But it
boom.
gets rid of your Glacial Chasm and
Oh,
Field of
that's
Deads. But you can also, like, if they have double blue up and they're 2 basics, you just kill a blue, and you're like, okay, do you have a 1 mana counter spell now? So I feel Strip Mine is slightly more versatile, it's just also like less mana. So you can actually like Strip Mine, Isengard Unleash, kill, right? So I like the versatility of killing basics to make sure you want Teferi Pro now in response to me killing your 3rd land, or you want to see if you live, right? So I like that ability to cut mana off with Strip Mine.
Plus, I'm
I'll
not gonna have
add
a
it.
basic to get with my demo field.
But like, yeah, no, like the thing about Demo Field is I just like putting it in every deck. It doesn't even have to be anti-fog meta. I just really like the card. I feel like
Oh,
it's
okay.
so versatile. So
Yeah.
if I have a slot for a colorless source of land in my package, I think it just goes to every deck. Honestly, it's like the first colorless land I put in outside
Do you
of like
play
Ancient
Strip
Tomb.
Mine in every deck or no? You play over Strip Mine
No.
personally? I'm
think-
a Strip Mine in every deck guy, so that's
I
kind
think
of my
Richard-
version of it.
Richard kind of won me over to try it again, but I was swapping them out for Demolition Field in all my decks. But it's true that there is a cost to actually activating it when you want to kill somebody. So,
But it is nice you don't go down a land, so there is upsides to demo field too, I guess.
All right, Krim, hit us with the card package.
Okay. So as you think about the building blocks of every deck, I think having graveyard, like things that kind of protect you from graveyard synergies and all the dying triggers, because in Magic now everything does something when it dies, stuff like that. I think if I'm playing black very easily, there's about 4 creatures now that I'm locked in on. And I think it's because it's always good to have something that just shut down all the aristocrat decks. So I kind of just play with this anti-dying creatures graveyard hate package, which is Dothy Voidwalker, as we all know, right? That's front and center. That card's very good. It's 2 mana, comes down,
Mhm.
shuts down everything that hits the yard. But as of recent, thanks to Foundations, I also have Abyssal Harvester now. And I think Abyssal Harvester is actually just good enough to play in any deck with black in it because so many things go to the graveyard. And Harvester reads 1 black. It's a 3/2. Tap it, exile target creature from a graveyard that was put there this turn. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a nightmare in addition to its other types. Then all other nightmare tokens you control, exile those ones. So just being able to snipe big creature cards hitting the graveyard and then benefiting off that is great. And when you're in black, you're playing removal spells, stuff like that. And edicts, of course, because those are great. And with all of that, I also have Gisa Glorious Resurrector. If a creature an opponent control would die, exile it instead, put it, or at the beginning of your upkeep, put all creatures exiled with Gisa onto the battlefield under your control. They gain Decayed. And then lastly, my favorite, the card that will win you the game, and a card that I have loved since its standard life because he's got those big arms wide open for a hug. It's Kalitas, Trader of Get. Lifelink 3/4. If non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card and put a 2/2 zombie into play onto the battlefield. Not tapped, by the way. 2 and a black. Sack another vampire or zombie. Put 2 counters on Kalitas. This card actually it's a very good hate card, and I think all these cards are very good hate cards that also can just close out a game. And I think that legit Kalitas, by far, you've seen it on Clash. I know I've done it. I just played it as a 4-drop. I didn't even have to have removal. Y'all just started doing things, and I started amassing a board. And that just won me the game, right? Things die in Commander. A lot. You don't actually have to do much. Things just die, and when they do, they always trigger something now. Well, luckily, these kind of all, in some way, shape, or form, maybe not Abyssal Harvester, that one's more of a value card, but the other 3 are just absurdly disruptive to those packages. And I know personally, maybe because my group of friends, there's lots of aristocrat players, and there's lots of those dies effects. So I just like being done with it, and not only having like a narrow card, like a rip, I need it to also close out the game. So these, okay, I guess maybe not rip in this, but like, you know, I've also thought about adding a Ghost Vacuum to this list because I've been playing a lot of Ghost Vacuum as well. So yeah, I don't know. I think these are all very much so the building blocks and veggies of every deck.
Why do you hate fun, Krim?
Because fun makes you have longer turns, and I need to shorten that. So by shortening that, I just deny you your game plan.
I think
I agree
these
that
cards
all
are
these
very
cards are really
strong,
good.
right? They're very strong, but they're win cons that must be removed immediately, essentially. And therefore, they don't fulfill the role as a hate piece. So, like, if I was an Aristocrats deck, I'd actually not be scared if Krim played a Kalitas, because I know it's being removed, like, instantly. Because you can't let it sit around, and then, like, someone rats the board, you make, like, 50,000 zombies. Same with, like, Voidwalker. Like, who's gonna let a Voidwalker sit around and accrue spells under? Gisa untaps, you probably win. So these are all win cons. And I don't feel they fulfill their role as hate, really, right? Because everyone's removing them immediately, right? And then they don't actually do the hate part. They're like a
Richard, let me ask you a
threat
question.
that wins
But I
the
thought
game.
we don't
right?
run removal.
Richard, ye who believes in no spot removal, right?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
gonna wipe the board, right? I'm gonna
Yeah.
take
If you
everything,
wipe
right?
the board, that's great. That's absolutely great. I get rid of everything that's
Don't
on the
make me
board. That's a
invoke the F
problem.
word, right? I get around all of these triggers.
Look, if the F word is played, then that's good, right? But the thing here is these sit on the board and they essentially serve as like if I were playing Karn, the great creator, and you're an artifact deck, people will eventually want to kill this. But until then, I have stalled out your game plan for a long time. I guarantee you most of the times, these people, like these cards coming out, and people won't remove it until they actually like absolutely have to, right? They want to get more
Someone
value.
plays a Gisa, you're like, yeah, okay, sit there and like accrue infinite value, right? Like
It gets no value if you don't do
instantly
anything.
become arch enemy, right? And then
Sure.
I mean,
But
yeah, if
Richard,
you want that, then here you go.
I
right?
play
Here's
as
my win
arch
con,
enemy
right?
all the time, okay? And so I may as
You're
well
used to
lock
it.
you out while you're doing it, right? And I think these cards are more than enough at doing their job. They hate out so many things, and if I can just pick off a few key pieces, sometimes you don't even have to play this on 4. I wait until I have an edict in hand with Kalitas or something like that, because I really want to make sure maybe the key problem cards are all gone. And if they're gone, I only need to have these stick around once for one key moment, one key interaction, and then that completely nullifies a person's deck.
I mean, they are very good at what they do if they stick around. I think Richard's point is like kind of true. If like Voidwalker in specific, I get very scared of just because I know
Sure.
like casting a huge thing for free could happen out of the blue. So they can be scary, but if you're playing against a lot of like aristocrat style decks and death trigger decks, I think they're really good. And I also really love Abyssal Harvester. It is kind of the odd one out on the list, but it's a card that I've been jamming in a lot of decks too. And it seems like it always gets a lot of value. Even if it's not the strongest like Blood Artist Hate or whatever, it's still a really good card.
This is the curve right here. The 2, the
Right.
3, the 4, right there. Like that's the curve.
So
Of
If
pure
you don't want
hatery.
Richard to sandbag
Yeah.
his F card, you definitely
Yeah.
do this, and I will snap it off.
Yeah, play
do
one
you
of these.
play
you
dedicated
draw it.
graveyard? Like, do you play Planar Void, Leyline of the Void,
They don't win the game.
Scavenger
They don't do-
Grounds? So you play
Richard-
these cards instead of those other cards, or do you play both? Or like, what is your approach when you use these?
I play these instead of them because I would also add Ghost Vacuum to that list because they are ways to hate out like maybe the graveyard or dies or stuff like that while also being able to close out a game. And I think that's very important when, like more and more cards are coming out and, you want to, the more 2-for-1s that I can put into a slot serves for a more fun experience for like me when I get to go and play. All right, well, instead of playing Ghost Vacuum, all like Planar Void, Leyline of the Void, all these things, I can kind of clump and cut some cards there and put more of my fun ofs in there, right? Because now my cards serve as a 2 for maybe multi-purpose card. And I think that's totally reasonable with cards like Kalitas, Dathi Voidwalker. These are win cons that also do something because there's nothing worse than if I just tap out, play a half stacks piece, I guess, or a half like hate piece, like Leyline of the Void, and then everyone gets upset anyways. But now my Leyline of the Void is a body. My Leyline of the Void is going to hurt you as well. And I think that's way better.
So yeah, I actually agree with Seth with Krim on this one because like I've said in the past that I don't like hate pieces when they don't actually do anything for you and they just like die eventually. Like I don't really like Rest in Peace for that reason, and I don't like Drannith Magistrate because it's just like a 1/3 or whatever. And if you're gonna get a lot of hate, you got to be able to back it up. And I've seen Kalitas multiple times at this point, like just take over games. And yeah, it does draw hate, but then it backs it up by just having a giant zombie army. So it's like, yes, you can't really deal with it with a board wipe because unless it's the F word. Because if you wipe the board, then suddenly there's a giant zombie army that's going to kill you. So you have to find spot removal. But if you don't believe in spot removal, then it's going to be very difficult to kill Kalitas. So it's like such a big threat. And yeah, it is going to be the arch enemy at the table. It's going to have a target on your head, but like. It's also a finisher. Like, it's just gonna, if it doesn't get dealt with, it just kills people. So, I like it.
Let's move on. I present to you part 2 of why red is the 3rd best color.
Oh, God.
And it is the fork package. Now, if you're not playing forks, you're not playing red. And I will 100% back that up. It's like playing white and not playing Teferi's Pro. Like, what are you even doing? So what is fork? Fork is double red. It's an interrupt, which is an instant. What the hell is the new Oracle text for this? I'll read Reverberate, which is new Oracle text, so it's more
It's
understandable.
the same text.
Copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So red has many of these effects. So fork and reverberate are the 2 cheapest that can copy any spell. There are some that only copy spells you control. Dualcaster Mage is a 3-mana 2/2 with flash that has fork on its ability, an ETB. Flare of Duplication, my nomination for the most busted card ever printed. It's a 3-mana fork, but you can sack a non-token red creature to play it, rather than paying its mana cost, and then reiterate 3-mana fork with buyback 3. So like, why are you playing fork? Okay, even if you had 0 synergy with your deck, you should still be forking. Seth casts Open the Way for 6. I fork it. Thank you. That's a 2-mana Open the Way for me. X = 4. We've seen this on Clash. Phil or Seth or someone doppelgang for $1 billion. I'm gonna double copy it, right? I'm gonna fork it, and then with my new mana, I'm gonna fork it again, right? So you can just like Phil Amanatu's Augury. Hello, here's a fork, right? Someone counterspell you, fork it back, right? So there's infinite things, but you can actually make fork a million times better by including the most scuffed card draw. So red cannot draw cards. Okay? Red has impulse card draw, which is like exile cards from the top. You can play them until end of turn or end of next turn. That's usually not as good as drawing cards because you can't really form a game plan around it, right? You got to just play whatever you get and like everyone sees what you get, right? So the only way to draw cards is to play cards like Cathartic Reunion. So that's a 2-mana spell. As an additional cost, discard 2, draw 3. And then you fork it, right? So then it becomes 4 cards, 4 mana, draw 6, right? And that's how you do card draw, right? There's like Demand Answers. There's 2 mana variants that are instant speed where you discard a card, draw 2 cards. And then there's 4 mana variants where you discard a card, draw 2 cards, create 2 treasures. So you Unexpected Windfall fork, you get 4 treasures, 4 cards, right? At the cost of 3 cards in hand.
So good.
So that's how you draw cards in red. And then if you want to just win the game, you play Mana Geyser, which is 5 mana, add a red for each tap land your opponents control. And then if that wasn't enough, you fork it. Okay? And if you actually have 11 mana to start with, you go infinite, right? Because you can reiterate, buy back Mana Geyser, and then infinitely fork it, right? But you need 11 mana to start up, right? And then, there's Jeska's Will, Rousing Refrain. There's all those spells that add infinite mana. So fork plus that is infinite mana, and surely you can win with that much. If you want to be cheeky, you go Price of Progress fork, right? 2 mana, probably win the game. But if for whatever reason it doesn't win the game, you fork it one more time and it probably wins the game. If you double fork it, you win. You fork
staple.
Insult to Injury. Hello. Damage times 4. You surely can win the game now. And then this is where it gets shady. So if you play all this, you might as well play Mizzix's Mastery and Underworld Breach, right? And Underworld Breach is you can play cards out of your graveyard, right? By paying their costs. So, you get back the Mana Geyser, you play the Mana Geyser, you get back to Jeska's Will, you fork it, and then everyone groans because you played Storm or Spellslinger or something, right? But like that's clearly include if you're trying to be sweaty, right? Same with Mizzix's Mastery, which casts all the spells in your graveyard. Then you just fork the Cathartic Reunion and then fork the Mana Geyser, and then surely you can win at this point. So fork. Never leave home without fork, right? You fork, and you're not even talking about forking like your other colors, right? If you're playing Izzet or something, you want to fork a blue spell, you want Amanatu's Augury ×2, go for it, right? You can also fork as counterspell protection, stuff like that as well, right? So fork. Fork is expensive. Reverberate is cheap. Reverberate is $1.50. Fork is $30.
Yeah. Is fork reserve list? I think it is. Reserve list. It is reserve list. Yeah.
They also got around it with Reverberate. There's like a funny story. They tried to be like, hey, what if we reprint the reserve list cards, but we just like change the name or something? And they made Reverberate.
Oh, is that why Reverberate?
Yes, that's why Reverberate. But also, fork makes the copy red, which is irrelevant.
It is
they took away that
technically
thing.
different.
Oh, wait, it does?
Yeah.
I didn't even know I did that.
But then the lawyers came back and they're like, hey, actually, you can't do that. Please don't do that. And then WotC was like, we won't do that anymore.
All right, we'll just wait and then we'll sell it with a gold border for $1,000 a pack. But anyway, I think the forks are really good though. Like I think you've sold me on playing forks. I don't know if every time I build a red deck, I'm going to play all those cards. And I also end up feeling dirty if I win with Underworld Breach because it's just cards so easy to win with.
To lower the power level because
yeah,
you've seen it. I'm like, well, I don't know, it's a value
you
breach,
just
but
win.
Oops, I won the game. And even though I didn't mean to do this, but how can you lose making 30 mana and drawing like 30 cards, right? So.
But especially in our meta, and maybe this is just Commander in general in 2024, but every game, there's someone that's casting these big spells. Often Phil, but like I cast a lot of big spells too. I imagine like Seagate Restorations, Amanatu Auguries, like on top of all the stuff that you can do with your own deck, it seems like an easy auto include. So I think for Fork and Reverberate at least, I'm going to start playing them all the time. Is Reiterate worth it if you're not trying to go infinite at 3 mana? Like, do you play all of these in every red deck, or are you playing that mostly like so you have a backdoor infinite combo plan?
So usually fork, reverberate, flare. Flare is the best one. Flare,
Okay.
like you want to Rogak everyone, right? Like the best commander, because red has terrible creatures, by the way. You're trying to play like red creatures. There's no Spirited Companion. Okay, but like if
Yeah.
you're playing like a 1-drop commander or a Rogak or the monkey, Ragavan, Flare is insane, right? Because like if Seth untaps with 5 mana, I don't know if he's gonna open the way or not. And I don't want to pass my turn doing nothing, hoping he opens the way for a fork. But I will gladly sack my commander for 4 lands or 3 lands, right? So
Yeah.
that's why loaded the ground commanders are really good. But Fork Reverberate, Dual Caster Mage, Flare of Duplication, those usually are contenders. And then the rest depends on like how spell heavy, if I have a different color. If I'm mono red, then I have to play all the red card draw. But if I'm with white, then I don't need to rely
Don't
on the
need
forks
card
as
draw
hard.
much.
And then Reiterate's just funny, right? Like just late game, you can just reiterate Teferi's pros and stuff, right? So it
Yeah.
depends if you have something useful to do with it. But late game, like that's funny. It's hilarious to just keep copying. But it's like forbid and capsize. Once people see it, they start gunning for you. So you need to be able to close the game very quickly. Otherwise, they're like, I can't cast any spell. He's just gonna copy it, right? So yeah.
I think you convinced me to try more of them. That's for sure.
Another mono red lover over here, big fan. I also run like basically 1 to 2 forks in any red deck. I think that's like the baseline for me. You could go all the way with this, and I played an Otters deck. It was like, is it Otters? And this was like I was literally running like all the. I think I wasn't running Rousing Refrain, but every other card was in, and no Dual Caster Mage because it was only Otters. But like outside of those, everything else was in there. I will say though,
because your commander copies too. So like
Yes.
every
So-
spell is like
so you could-
4x, right?
so you can see how effective it was like a Cathartic Reunion. So I think this is actually a legitimate package. I think you always want to have like 1 or 2. The only difficulty is like, yeah, like if you have too many fork effects, then you're incentivized to be like, okay, I'm not going to progress my board on like the early turns because I'm going to hope to fork something. And sometimes it works. Like sometimes you get a ramping growth, but then sometimes you don't. So it's a little bit inconsistent. But like having just like 1 or 2, then you'll like have it like in the mid to late game, and then you'll always have something decent eventually to hit. But also you're missing out on one of my favorite forks, and that's Return the Favor, which is a spree card. It's double red, and then you spree it, and it's either a fork for 1 more mana, or you can redirect a spell, or you can do both. You could pay like spree cost for both of them, 1 mana each, and you either redirect and copy, or one or the other. And I like that over reiterates, unless like your mana guys are in infinite looping or whatever, or you have like infinite mana or something like that. But like because you could actually also redirect spells coming at you, like somebody swords your commander or whatever, and be like, actually you're gonna swords your own creature. Sorry, your own commander dies. Oops, daisy. I actually like the versatility on that one a lot.
I actually thought about that spree card for a while, and I've tried it several times, and the 1 mana is just not worth it. Like, because it's 3 mana to fork. It's red,
Yes.
generic, and the versatility. Like, I am not a big believer in deflecting SWAT or bolt bend or any of those.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I don't
that's
I don't
for me,
play
James.
those, and I actually tried this because I'm like, oh, 1 mana more versatile, but the 1 mana makes all the difference to trying to, because you need to fork your own spell, right? So normally. So, you're adding a whole mana to that, which makes things a lot harder. So I actually don't like that, but I wouldn't fault you for running it if you're like a deflecting SWAT believer.
I'm the
And if you're
biggest-
fork flooded, good thing all the red card draw is like discard draw, right? So you can chuck your extra forks to Cathartic Reunion if you have like way too many forks. But I'm telling you, that's probably the wrong move. If you have like 4 forks in hand, just sit there, pass the turn, look like nothing's happening, and you'll find a fork target before you die. I am searching that you can fork for good value before.
But then you don't have a board presence, and then people just punch you in the face and you die.
yeah, but someone's gonna be like, "Well, I secret rendezvous," or someone's gonna
Yeah.
draw cards or ramp or do something, right? So you'll most likely have a fork. Like, think of every single time someone doesn't pay for Rhystic Study or Mystic Remora, like that's a fork target, right? Like, I guess outside of artifacts. But like people play lots of spells, so hold tight with your forks.
I'm a firm believer that I think in forks if you don't run too many though. Tomer I think probably has it right in that I agree that it's probably like 2 to like 3. I think how many forks do you run, Tomer?
Yeah,
Do you think
I
2 to
like
3?
to.
Yeah, 2 to 3 forks seems pretty good to me, but yeah, you don't want to sit.
Are you a
back
bolt
too
bend
much.
believer? Are you a bolt bend?
Okay.
Bolt
Bolt
bend.
believer?
Bolt bend, no, because I would play deflecting SWAT
Deflecting
first.
SWAT.
But even then, deflecting SWAT has to be in a very specific deck, right? But
Yes.
fork, I can get any spell, even if it doesn't target. So fork, I can get down with that. But bolt bends, not yet.
You'll see the swats. I've swatted so many times. It's such great value in bolt bend.
If I want to
I've
play,
never convinced anybody.
like blossoming defense, if I'm trying to play blossoming defense, then I will play deflecting SWAT. But if I'm not trying to play that card, I don't believe in randomly picking off something for fun in the case that my thing gets picked off. Like, I don't think that's worth the.
No,
the
but your
card.
thing survives. It's like if I have a deck that wants my commander to stick around and I don't want target removal to hit it, I'm just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, so
I'll
if you're
play it.
considering a blossoming defense effect, then this is valid,
Yeah,
right? But if you're
yeah,
not
yeah.
considering that, then I'm like, I don't care about
Yeah.
deflecting SWAT. Yeah.
Are the blue ones worth playing or no? Is it different because of the color difference? That was my big question. Like,
one.
because there's like twin cast, right? Copy target as their sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for it. There's Narset's reversal. Copy target as their sorcery spell. Bounce it back to your hand. You get a copy of it. Like,
Narset's
are
reversal,
those?
very
Should we think of those as staples too in blue decks, or is it a color thing?
I play
think
Narset's reversal. I think that card
That's
is
3 mana or 2 mana, Narset's?
Two.
They're both two. They're both double blue, but 2 mana. Yeah.
Narset also puts them behind too. Not only do you get the fork, it's like
get the
better. It's
tempo.
better fork, yeah, because you get you get the fork, but then you also put them back as well, which is ridiculous.
It's slightly different because if you're holding double blue up, people are very wary, right?
That is
So the chances of getting a big spell, but otherwise it should be the same, right? But blue doesn't. You don't need to fork your blue spells to make magic happen. I think you do need to fork your red spells to make magic
Yeah,
happen, right?
I could see
But
that.
like I don't know. If I'm holding double blue, you may not snap off that open the way. You know what I mean? Like that's the difference. Whereas double red, I don't think you even care that I'm gonna fork it. Really, like you might care, but it's less feels bad than like literally your spell gets countered, right?
Yeah.
So double blue is trickier. But I think red, you definitely need it. But maybe I'll try more of them. I mean, we've seen Narset's reversal do work.
We have seen reversal, yeah, really pop off.
All right, Seth, hit us up.
All right. I got an easy one, a simple one. We're talking Urza Saga. So Urza Saga, one of the most powerful lands and maybe enchantments in Commander. You probably know what it does. It comes into play. First level, makes a mana. Second level, you can pay 2 and tap it to make a construct. Gets big based on how many artifacts you have. The big deal, though, last level, level 3, you tutor out an artifact that costs 0 or 1 mana, put it on the battlefield, and then shuffle. Then you lose your Urza Saga. So if I'm playing Urza Saga, I want like usually 3 or 4 artifacts that I can tutor up with it. Because you always got the risk if you play, 1 or 2 that you draw and then you don't get the value out of it. So normally for me, there's like a small group of cards that show up again and again in my Urza Saga decks. Number 1, I guess, is Sol Ring, although it's banned on Commander Clash. But if I'm not playing Commander Clash, Sol Ring is easily number 1 to get back the mana that you lose from losing the Urza Saga. But then also Shadow Sphere, I play in all my Urza Saga decks. Incidental life gain this equipment, gives +1/+1 trample and lifelink, and it can make stuff lose hexproof and indestructible, which doesn't come up very often, but when it does, it's kind of a blowout. But mostly you can put on a creature and gain back a bunch of life, plus trample is good. And then the third option, Wayfarer's Bauble or Expedition Map, depending on the deck. If I got a bunch of basics, it's probably Wayfarer's Bauble, just as like a colorless rampant go of pay 2, sack it, and tutor up a basic land. If I'm playing Cabal Coffers or something like that, a really powerful Nykthos, this one land that's going to put me super far ahead, then it's usually Expedition Map, because I'd rather pay 2 and get that land in my hand than pay 2 and get a basic on the battlefield. And then the fourth one is a little more deck dependent. Soul Guide Lantern, I think, is the most evergreen, or choose your favorite 1 mana, draw a card, graveyard hate spell. Skull Clamp's also really good, but you can't play that in every deck. So Urza Saga, for me, I would say Sol Ring, Shadow Sphere, Wayfarer's Bauble / Expedition Map, and then a graveyard hate spell, and maybe Skull Clamp if I'm in the right deck for Skull Clamp. So, but what do you guys play? I know Crim mentioned Amulet of Vigor earlier. Is there anything that you put in your Urza Saga packages all the time that I don't?
There's missing a certain
Glasses of Urza.
accessory. Yeah,
I will say this though.
glasses
So
over
I
there.
actually don't play Urza Saga's packages anymore. So I used to do this, where you're like, wow, you got to have multiple targets, right? But I only play Urza Saga when there is a very specific 1 or 0 mana artifact that I really want. Like, for example, if
Interesting.
I'm an Amulet of Vigor deck, I put one Amulet of Vigor in, and I put the Urza Saga in. And if for whatever reason Amulet of Vigor is in my hand, I'm already happy. I don't need another target, right? Because the last thing I want to do is draw like random useless 1 and 0 mana things that like I don't want. Like this is like 6-7 deck slots already, right? I'm struggling to fit the cards I need into my deck. So I actually don't play Saga packages anymore. And like you see me spending 4 or 5 mana to get a land, right? I don't take going down a land lightly, right? Because when the Saga pops, you're going down land. I will pay 4 mana to get 1 land over playing a mana rock, right? So in no world do I think it's worth it to exchange Saga for a Soul Ring, you know? So when I play like that, it only makes sense that whatever I'm getting has to be like game breaking. Like maybe it's my Skull Clamp, maybe it's my Amulet of Vigor, maybe it's something like that. I don't want to go down a land, get a Soul Guide Lantern, cycle it. I'm like what have you done? Right? This was like terrible. Right? I mean, the exception maybe in white where it can like catch up ramp or something, right? But in general,
yeah.
I don't play the full package. Just so I'm curious, do you actually play these 7 cards every time you play Saga? Like how wide is your package?
It's usually 3 to 4. Like
3 to
I
4?
wanted to get the extra ones in there because those are ones that show up depending on the deck. Like Expedition Map and Skull Clamp. So the typical package would be like Soul Ring, Shadow Sphere, and then Wayfarer's Bauble probably would be the top 3. And then beyond that is where, kind of depending on the deck, if I can take advantage of Skull Clamp, it's so good. Like Skull Clamp is one of those cards I could see playing, like you were talking about playing for an Amulet or something, where in the right deck, it's so good. That could be your one target for Urza Saga and it'd still be worth it because it just generates so much card advantage. And then Expedition Maps mostly for like, if I'm playing a Coffers deck, a Nykthos deck, a Gaia's Cradle deck. And then Soul Guide Lantern, I end up cutting it more than I should. I feel like it should be number 4 in every deck, but then I end up cutting it a lot because I'm greedy and don't play Graveyard Hate like a responsible player. But technically, I think I would get value out of keeping it in every deck because worst case, it cycles for 1 mana. So the risk of drawing this bad card is pretty low, right? Because worst case, you just cycle it away and get another shot at it.
That's too
I'm
bad.
kind of like Richard. I only run Urza Saga if there's something I really, really want. So like if I'm like, I have a mono red Voltron, so I really want Commander's Plate. Like that's one of the best cards for my Voltron deck. So I'm gonna run Urza Saga so I can find my Commander's Plate. But then like I'm always gonna like on top of that I'm gonna run like Soul Ring and then like a Shadow Spear or whatever, and then I'm good. And then like so like I'm like set where I want 3, but I'm like Richard where I need to have something that's like very, very good. However, like even if I have the thing that I already drew or whatever, I always want to have like I don't run Soul Ring in my decks, but if I did have a Soul Ring, I think like being able to go Urza Saga, tap it, crack it, Soul Ring, I'm up like 3 colorless mana that turn or 2 colorless mana that turn. It's kind of like ridiculous.
That is pretty good.
So yeah, that's like a good consolation prize, I would say, if you don't get if you already have the thing that you wanted to tutor up.
Are there any secret 0 or 1 mana artifacts, Krim, for your Urza
No,
Saga
it's a stack.
packages?
I mean,
Pieces at 0.
you mentioned Amulet of Vigor, and that's the main
That's
thing that
good.
I'm trying, and like that's other than that, like everything is pretty stock, right? Shadow Spear, stuff like that. But Amulet of Vigor, I'm telling you, I think that's actually the truth.
I might
All
start
right.
jamming it in my Saga decks just to see. I might, just for you, Krim, I might try it out.
The problem is
You'll-
people get
you'll love it.
antsy. Every time I play the Amulet of Vigor, you're like, oh, something bad's happening,
Mhm.
right? Like there's some Kodama combo happening, right? Like it's one of those things where people don't normally play fairly. So once you start playing it fairly, like people get like really antsy about it. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. All right, Tomer, what do you have for us?
So there's I have people poo-pooing mono blue a lot. Saying it's like on low tier. And there's I feel like people kind of undersell a lot of what mono blue has to offer. And what they have to offer, dear friends, is actually the fact that islands are very, very good. And I know some people over here, some people in this very room would be like, ooh, what's the point of a basic island? It is trash in my mono blue deck. I will try to run as few as possible. But no, my friend, there's actually a lot of reasons why, especially in mono blue. Of all things, of all the monocolors, I think blue probably has the biggest reasons to actually run more islands. And I'm going to tell you why with my Islands Matter package. Basically, I don't usually run packages that much in my decks. Like I try to go for synergies. But if I am in mono blue, a bunch of these always end up in those decks. Top two, I would say. Top number 1 out of 1 is Scourge of Fleets. This is a 7 mana blue Kraken. It's a 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, return each creature your opponent's control with toughness X or less to its owner's hand, where X is the number of islands you control. So if you have like 5 islands on the battlefield, boom, you basically just one side board wipe all your opponent's stuff. Great reanimation target, great blink target. Like you could repeatedly do this ETB over and over again. Absolutely love it. The other one is basically the same thing, but it's a sorcery version of it. 6 mana Spectral Deluge. You do same effect, but it's on a sorcery, and its foretell costs 3 mana. So you pay 2 mana, you foretell it, and then you pay 3 mana later on to cast it for way cheaper. These cards do not affect your board state. So if you have a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, it doesn't affect them. It's no tempo loss, and also clears the way for attacks and everything with no reprises. So you can kill somebody, and then you're not worried about getting attacked on the backswing. Then we have High Tide, which I think is just like late game as a ritual effect. It's like basically the mono blue Mana Geyser type card. It's not as good as Mana Geyser unless you're trying to do combo shenanigans with it or whatever. But if you have like 6 islands on the battlefield, you cast, pay 1 for High Tide, and then suddenly you're up 5 mana for the rest of the turn because you tap the other 5 islands. That's ridiculous. Like Flow of Knowledge is another ridiculous one, where 5 mana instant, draw a card for each island you control and discard 2 cards. So if you're playing more draw go style, you can keep up your mana for counter spells or whatever. Then you draw a whole bunch of islands. I can keep going. There's a bunch. There's a couple other ones on this that are very good. I think Submerge is very good too. But yeah, the islands, they're actually really good. If you're in mono blue, you should actually have a higher island count.
The Acknowledgement of Spectral Deluge, that's a card that I think slips a lot of people's minds. I think that card is very good. That bounces only your opponent's creatures with toughness X or less to its owner's hand, where X is the number of islands you control. And you can foretell it. It's 6 mana, but you can foretell it and then spend 3. That is absurd. That's probably the standout card on this list that you've dropped here. I have played with that card so much, and no one plays around it. Like, oh my god, it's so good. Because, naturally people are like, oh, it's like Saw It Coming or something like that. Crim's going to play a bunch of counter spells. But it really, I'm just going to mass bounce all your stuff, so I don't have to counter. You do whatever you want. I'm just going to clear the way and then close out the game.
I mean,
yeah. You like Flow of Knowledge, Seth, right? That's draw a card for each other discard. There's a second one. I forgot what it's called. Do you know what it's called? There's a very similar one to that. There's
like a 6 mana sorcery.
Flow of Ideals.
Flow of Ideals, something like that. Yeah, I played those two.
Better.
And I play all the scuffed dual lands to make it work. So like the Crim dual lands, the island plains that just enters tapped and does nothing else. Right? So when I play Azorius, I like to sometimes play that if I'm playing Flow of Knowledge. And then that's the thing I get behind, Tomer. Everything else is so scuffed. Like Spectral Deluge. I've tried, so I played a lot of Izzet. Spectral Deluge has failed me so many times. Remember that game of Clash where I just died and I had something foretold? That was Spectral Deluge.
Oh, it was Spectral Deluge.
Because someone had like a 7 toughness creature or some crap, and like I couldn't ramp hard enough, and the only way to ramp is to do the O'Hare shenanigans, right? Like to put like other lands, like search for Azcanta, Overflowing Well, the only way to ramp in blue. So once creatures get too big, you get like super sad. And my conclusion is play Oblivion Stone and call it a day rather than trying to play Spectral Deluge, because
Oblivion
creatures are so big.
Your stuff.
Yeah, these are apples and oranges.
Creatures are too big now. Like if there's a green player at the board, like you manage to get 8 islands on the battlefield to get a good chance of like bouncing it back, right? Like it's actually very difficult.
Okay, so there's cards I would like you to.
You had to live 8 turns, drop an island every single turn.
No,
and like your green opponents dropping like 8/8s or something on turn 4, right? Like this is the problem with the island
exists, Wayfarer's Bauble exists. We can look at your red ramp package. We could take half
Surveyor
of
Scope exists. And I'm telling you, every time Spectral Deluge is like shockingly underwhelmed, I get tricked into playing it every single time. I'm like,
okay,
I ramp hard.
If it's like 1/7/7, then you just use a spot removal to remove that thing, and then you're good. Like
Spot removal. Richard's
Yes.
not
I
playing
felt like
Gauntlet.
Richard's
I'm just
problems
saying,
are
like, it's actually a lot harder, even if you are playing 100% islands, because just look at the quantity of lands you have on the battlefield. It's not like green, where you're explosive vegetationing out lands, right? You're like one land a
Yeah.
turn, and most likely people are playing above curve. Like, if it's turn 8, do you think a green player is playing an 8/8? They're playing like a 16/16 or something, you know? Like, it's
but you
it's
just
gonna be
spot
very hard
removal
for you
it.
to spectral deluge anything.
You just spot removal the
then
big
you-
thing,
then
and you
you
wipe
bounce it.
all the small
You
things.
think they played
and
only
medium
one
sizing.
16/16 Tomer? It's green we're talking about.
It
How much
sounds
is it-
like you're applying it in the absolute absurd situations where yes, the green player's already won. Then right?
I'm
Because
just
in
saying,
this-
I was on board with you guys, and I have been trying this card like several times, and every single time it's underwhelming and like even beyond expectation. You know what I mean?
Every
I'm
single
like,
time I played it, it's always been overwhelmingly good.
Yeah,
It's just
really
like it usually
interesting.
seals the
Same.
game. It's usually like the best card in my deck is like a Scourge of Fleets and Spectral Deluge. It's that good.
It's so good, and it's even cheaper than Scourge of Fleets. I don't know. I
Yeah.
I am a strong believer in Spectral Deluge because
Scourge
it
I like
really
more if it's like blinky, but Spectral, if you don't have any synergies, I think this is like the bomb.
yeah.
So Tomer,
Wait,
you
you
have
think it's
extra
better
planar
than Scourge of
lands,
Fleets?
Gauntlet of
Hmm.
Power, and Cage Sun, which are
Yeah.
things that like double your mana if you choose a type. Extra planar land is interesting because you go down a land to do it. Do you
Yeah.
include these in all blue decks? How do you actually play?
Almost all. Extra planar lens is a little bit scuffed when you have the other things that care about island count. But like Gauntlet of Power and Cage Sun, I just jam into my mono blue decks all the time because like ramping, like I try to focus on island ramp as much as possible. So like the Wayfarer's Bauble effects, the Psalms from Minox, even like Terramorphic Expanse. Like I'll run a couple non-basics, but those non-basics will be there to ramp out more islands, like Mirror Landscape or whatever. And then those are just like easy freebies for me at that point. It's just like all my lands tap for double. It's a cheaper, what is it, like a Mirari's Wake effect essentially for me, or same cost as Mirari's Wake for the Gauntlet of Might. I don't really care about your opponents helping you too much because unless they're also mono blue, I don't really care. Like, okay, 2 of your lands tap for double, whatever. All my lands tap for double. Like, that's great. Until they print like the Yavimaya for
I mean,
islands.
the
then I'll be
downside
like,
is the planar lens gets removed and you went down a land. But in general,
yeah.
like unless
The
there's
extra
another
planar land's a
mono
little
blue
bit
player
sus.
at the pod, like it's
Yeah.
not going to be too relevant.
the power and Sun are the top 2. But also, I want the record to show that Floodgate is actually the trick too. If you are
That
a
was why I
blue
was
deck,
laughing when you started
Floodgate, number
talking.
4
It is
mana
no,
blue,
no,
0/5
no.
wall defender.
Go for fade
It has
away here, too.
flying. When it has flying, you sacrifice it. When Floodgate leaves the battlefield, it deals damage to each non-blue creature without flying equal to half the number of islands you control rounded down. So first of all, magnificent flavor win of all time because it's a little at Floodgate. So if you raise the Floodgate, then the water comes through, which is amazing. And then you take damage.
But
to
only
half
half
of
the
that.
water. Only half the water comes through.
Yeah,
The
look.
other half-
Okay.
So
So
wait,
it's
so this means in practice, Tomer, you have to pay a 4-mana 0/5, find a way to have it leave the battlefield, and you have like 8 islands, and you deal 4 damage to everything, and most of your opponent's stuff still lives. Like, it seems like even in the best case scenario, Floodgate is not very good. Like,
You
you need
put it in a
so
Flood
many
deck.
islands.
You have a displacement
you-
kitten with that baby, and then you're
But
just
you-
cooking. And then everything just keeps dying and dying
I
and
mean,
dying.
I
and
can
you're
buy
like,
it. If you're playing a blink deck or you're building some weird Floodgate combo deck, I get that. But like in a
Yeah.
random deck, I was talking about Spectral Deluge can't kill anything. Like Floodgate is half of that, right?
It's
so
And
fun.
the
You
second
need
card
twice
to
as
activate it.
but it's
that's
so
rough,
funny.
right? But if you're like planning on like triple blinking every time,
It is
then yeah,
funny.
go for it, right? It's like hilarious, right? So foil is a card here that I cannot get behind. I actually played foil.
I don't
And
I don't
the cost of
understand
the game.
foil.
So
bad.
foil is a 4-mana instant. You may discard an island, and I didn't read this
Yeah.
part when I played it, and another card rather than paying the spell's
Yup.
mana cost. I think actually, Tomer, you won a game of Clash because of this, where you were wheeling us, and then I wheeled into a
Oh, yeah.
foil, and I had no island in that hand, but I had because it had to discard 2,
Hmm.
right? So in one earlier turn, I discarded 3 cards to counterspell, and then eventually wheeled into this and I was playing a full island deck because I was playing full Flow of Knowledge and all that stuff, but my hand just happened to not have an island, and then you managed to cast your spell and win. And I was like, I did not read this card correctly. It is way worse than I thought it would be.
I
Do you
just read
play
it in
this? There's
Edric.
no way, right?
Yeah.
You play all the other free counter spells before.
I read it in
right?
Edric. I ran it in my Heliod deck, I believe.
Is it even
when we
worth
were
it in
drawing-
Edric though?
Mm.
Is it budget
Yeah.
reasons?
No, because I'm drawing like 8 cards a turn. I'm gonna have a bunch of
That
islands.
was
in
my
the deck.
reasoning. I was a Kiora draw cards deck. You were wheeling me left and right, and I still couldn't get foiled to do what I wanted. I'm like, that was the
It's a shame.
optimal situation for it, right?
Skill issue, I guess. I don't.
It is skill issue. I can't use it. I can't use it.
I do think though that Tober foil's pretty bad. Right?
It's
Like,
pretty memes. It's pretty good.
Come
though.
on.
It's pretty
That's
good.
like a
It's pretty
city
oh
good.
yeah, I
Come
mean,
on,
yeah,
on
there's a lot of
yourself.
meme value, but my lord, is that card bad?
Hey, it's one of the MVPs in Edric because I also don't own a Fierce. So
All right, Krim, take us home with the last package.
Okay, so the last package, I think when you think about, my play style, right? And Seth always assumes I have a counter spell.
Oh my
So-
god, I
True.
just saw this package.
So let's not lie here, okay? I have a package depending on of counter spells that depend on any color variant that I am in. So yes, I sit there crunching the numbers, and through it all, every counter spell I put in my deck, because I think that y'all someone's got to speak up for the counter Magic players. All my counter spells do something outside of just countering a spell, right? Yes, Krim, modal counter spells are good. But in all seriousness, I think almost like tons of cards in the current year do some seriously sweet things. Naturally, you can assume Mana Drain's always there, because Mana Drain to me is not just a counter spell. It's a burst in mana, right? It's also a ramp spell. It's my blue ramp, which if you're in blue-green, that's where I put Plasm Capture, right? Because Plasm Capture, another cheap counter spell, that'll do that. Arcane Denial, like, funny enough, on this list of counterspells, Counterspell is not on here. And that's because I think Counterspell is just not good in Commander. Arcane Denial, that one I think is significantly like by leagues better than Counterspell by being
Yeah.
able to replace itself, draw you cards, potentially depending on the deck. If I'm on a draw Punisher deck, I've got a Bowmaster, I am more than happy to have you draw cards, right?
you can even
and
counter
then,
your own spell, and then
Yeah,
if
you
you're
can
like
even
late
counter your own
game and you're like, I don't want this card, I counter my own spell, I draw 3.
oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah. And then Outlaws gave us Smirking Spelljacker, which is multiple things here. So Smirking Spelljacker, I know you're all like, Krim, that's a staple. Why don't you tell us what that is? 4 and blue, it's a flash 3/3 Djinn with flying, and when it enters, exile target spell an opponent controls. And whenever it attacks, if a card is exiled with it, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. I think this is a solid body. It flies. It potentially gets you a really good spell of your choice. Just like how I have Urtai if I'm in blue and black, which counters or kills a creature. Planeswalker counters an ability. He's modal. Your opponent's draw a card. And I think the standout, the all-star that I have seen in this past year that I have found myself putting in every deck, 3 Steps Ahead. I've said it before.
Yeah.
3 Steps Ahead is actually the best counterspell, I think, like that has come out in recent years for Commander, because you can 1 and then it has Spree, right? It's blue, but then it has Spree of 1 and blue counter target spell, or +3 generic, create a token that's a copy of artifact or creature you control, or +2 draw 2 and discard a card. I mean, this is phenomenal in Standard,
Good.
and it has been absurdly nuts in Commander. And, depending on the variant, I've got all sorts of packages. So if you have Simic, I have my counter spells. But my favorite is if you're in red, you have Invert Polarity and Is It. That one is just choose target spell, then flip a coin. If you win the flip, gain control of that spell. And then you may choose new targets for it. If you lose the flip, just counter it. So
Card is
you either
insane.
get to it's
Yeah, that card is
absurd.
wild.
It's so
You lose
good.
the
So
flip,
if
just counter it. Don't worry.
yeah, just counter it, right? And then Azorius, you have Render Silent, which is kind of like Silence, and of course a Cancel, which is huge because sometimes, you have those green players who have 4 million mana. You just need you know what? Your turn's taking too long. I'm going to end your turn. That's it. That's on. Some people who also have too many things to do, I'm just going to end their turn. And then one that's actually slipped through a lot of people's minds is Reverse the Polarity. Not to be confused with White Card Reverse Polarity, by the way. It's from Doctor Who. It's 1 blue. Choose 1. counter all other spells, or switch each creature's power and toughness until end of turn, or creatures can't be blocked this turn.
Ooh, that was interesting.
So
Yeah.
these are all cards that I have now, like when I play a counter spell, they can't just counter a card. You gotta give me a little bit more, right? And I think these are like some of the core cards I have set aside, you know, whenever I have to build whatever the theme is of the week for Clash. I gotta have my counter spells. What color variants am I in? All right, these are the color variants I'm going into.
But how many? So realistically, you're building a random deck. How many counter spells go into that
5.
deck?
5. Because
Okay.
they're not just counter spells.
And like Fierce Guardianship, Force of Will, like those free counter spells, Flare of Denial. Do those make the list or no?
Not
Swan
really.
Song, an offer you
this is
can't
gonna sound-
refuse. Like those people that normally play in CDH, right?
Yeah, those are great CDH things because you're pushing this win condition that you just single-handedly need to resolve, right? I need to have Demonic Consultation, Thoracle of like resolve.
Yeah.
Great. In a casual game, the spell I'm going to counter is more often than not going to like win, like, you know, like not win me the game or anything like that. It's just to keep me alive, or I could use it proactively to push my win con through, but my win cons aren't going to be like some kind of 2-card cheese, right? So I expect to play the long game, and I expect to grind things out, and because of that, I build my decks to my play style. So these cards can counterspell you, but also grind out the game in some capacity. So
Some of
believe it or
them-
not, Force of Will, down a card. Down a
So-
card,
Down 2 cards.
don't like it. Down 2 cards, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Foil
then, you know,
down
Fierce
3 cards.
Guardianship, good. It's still a very strong card, but more often than not, it depends on the commander, right? Like, depends on the commander. It's not an auto include, but from more often than not, I will include it because that's just a good, cheap, free spell. But everything else has to do something on top of it.
So I think I'm curious about the more expensive ones because a lot of those are ones I play too. I play less counters than you do. I usually play like 2 counters maybe instead of 5. But I really like the flexibility of 3 steps ahead. I've come around on Arcane Denial, Mana Drain. Curious though about like Plasm Capture, Smirking Spelljack. Are those like not too expensive? Like how have they played out for you in practice? Because when I just read and see like 5 mana or 4 mana, I'm kind of like, I'm probably not putting that in my deck. Am I missing something, Crim, by not including these more expensive looking counter spells?
That's it right there at the end. You see it as only a counter spell, right? It is more than a counter spell to me. So yes, Smirking Spelljacker technically isn't a counter spell. It exiles the spell off the stack, but it also steals that spell for me, right? So would I pay, let's just say, I don't know, 3 mana, right? That's a bounce a spell off the stack. Cool. Now you give me a 3/3 flyer with flash. How much mana is that to you? And then on top of that, I get to cast the spell that I'm stealing. How much mana is that to you, right? That's really, at the end of the day, like a 9 to 10 mana spell. And in a multiplayer game, you need your counter spells to do more than just actually counter a spell. So if you want to go toe-to-toe and like get plus on value, you gotta play like these 5 mana counter spells read like a lot up front, but you're getting way more than what you're spending on it. So to me, like counterpoint is one thing, right? Counter a target spell, you may cast a creature, instant or sorcery or planeswalker from your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to that spell's mana value that you countered without paying its cost. I just reanimated something, spell casted something on top of that while also countering your spell. I think more often than not, this is going to get me something, right? And I think that's good value. So obviously these are all dependent on the decks and things like that. And Plasm Capture, that's just a super ramp spell, which you love in Simic, right? You just protected your game plan and then you ramped out your AC or something with protection mana backed up.
What if we go more expensive, Crim? Like Commandeer.
Sublime
what is
Epiphany.
it?
What about Desertion?
Spelljack.
Just
Desertion.
Spelljack, like the
Oh,
ones
this
that
is
like
gonna
are
be
just a
fun.
lot, and you just take this. I guess Smirking Spelljacker is kind of similar to that, but like, do you play the more expensive ones that like just straight up yoink it?
Okay, so Desertion, that's just counter a spell, right? And sometimes like
That-
you
it's like
counter
counter a creature, and you get the creature. Is
Yeah.
that? The
Yeah,
one?
you get a
Okay.
creature.
I think it's
right?
you get the if it's an artifact or something too.
Counter target spell, if it's an artifact or creature, you get to put
Ah.
on the battlefield under your control.
They always
Artifact
counter
or
it, but
creature.
sometimes you get the thing too. I guess Smirking Spelljacker is
Smirking
better.
Spelljacker
than
just
that,
straight
right?
up better, right? 'Cause
It's
you
just
flash
better?
it in, you attack, and if you get a second attack, you get another copy.
Yo, you could blink it in response too to a spell in the sack. That's
Ooh.
That's cool.
And it
Yeah,
exiles
that's some
too,
upside.
right? So
Yep.
yeah.
And it doesn't counter because also in the current year, everything has can't be countered attached. Right? So, especially when it's green, my arch nemesis. So I need to be prepared for that. And so desertion, these things are a little bit just not power crept enough, right? They're okay. Like if I'm looking even more expensive, then I'm looking at Sublime Epiphany. And that's about the top, the absolute tip top of the curve before I start looking into other things.
what about Old
What about
Faithful Cryptic
foil?
Command?
Yo.
That's 4 mana.
So many blue
If it
pips.
weren't triple blue pips,
Oh,
you were talking
Oh,
about
we got Plasm
Archmage's.
Capture here. We got Render Silent. We got a lot of pips. Now I know why Crim plays all the terrible dual lands.
Archmage.
His
Yo,
spells
hey,
are all
dual
pips.
Do you see why
True.
now Amulet of Vigor makes more sense? These lands are just untapped. It's crazy. Like, I genuinely think that, yeah, maybe Cryptic can be decent. I still play it in some 2-color decks, right? Like Fairies. I mean, that's more so just because I have a Lorwyn Cryptic, so I gotta. But, you know, Fairies, Rogues, all of these decks, like Blue-White Spirits, I do play Cryptic still. It's still very good. So, Cryptic may not be on this list, but consider it honorable, like just pretty much on here and imply that it's on here. Just the message of this package is more so your counterspells now do a lot more, and they need to.
I play one counter spell, and it's Pact of Negation.
Oh god.
Much of a counter.
Like,
I don't
this
know,
makes a lot of
I-
sense when you're a control deck and you're using like you play 10 counters, and your 10 counters are like your win cons as well, right? You're you know picking off spells and doing things. But if I'm like trying to execute some random game plan, I don't have 4 mana to counter anything for value. Like I just need to make sure
Yeah.
my thing works, right? And to me, the most reliable is Pact of Negation. And then maybe like a Swan Song or something like that, you know, if I'm feeling sauce, maybe an Arcane Denial. But usually I just play one counter spell and call it a day. I'm curious. Crim said 5. I say 1. How many like counter spells do you guys play in like a generic deck?
Usually 1 or 2. I'd say 2 is the average, probably.
I don't think I've gone lower than 3. Like,
I'm at,
and like
like,
3 is like
3.5.
I'm pulling teeth, like really not comfortable,
It
right?
hurts.
Like I
It
am the
hurts.
most uncomfortable I've ever been.
I'm
Tomer,
like
how many are
3
you
and
running?
4.
3 or 4?
I'm like 3 and 4. Yeah.
Okay.
But the difference is now, I think, again, I don't look at these as just counters. So they are more
Yeah.
than that.
All right. That takes us to the end of our package discussion. We had a lot of cool packages here. I wonder if
Yeah.
the comments have any cool packages or maybe additions to our packages. Maybe we should be playing something else in addition to these cards. And how many counter spells are you running? I'm always very curious how much counter spell, because people are like, well, you play 8 spot removal, 8 counter spells. And I'm like, what do you even have in your life? Where do you fit all these cards? Are you running 150 cards? Like, what's going on?
You cut
So
out
how
win
many counter
counts, Richard.
spells do you run? How many counter spells do you run? And don't tell me you cut the lands for them, please.
Yeah.
Well, think of the Stupor as kind of a counter spell, right? You can kind of
Yeah,
look for that.
Yeah, you just play all the MDFC
why not?
counter spells.
Yes.
So let us know in the comments any cards we missed, any cool packages you have, and we'll see y'all back here next week.